Hello, and thank you for joining me for Storytime with Mr. C. I am Mr. C, and for those of you who are back for more, thank you so much, and welcome back. For those of you tuning in for the first time, welcome. If you like what you hear, please go check out my first 3 episodes. Here on Storytime with Mr. C, I will be sharing stories that I have written, or a friend or family member has written, or maybe even something you have written. If you would like for me to share one of your stories here on Storytime with Mr. C, get your story or stories ready to go and shoot me an email at storytimewithmisterc@gmail.com. Again, that is storytimewithmisterc@gmail.com, and Mr. is spelled out M-I-S-T-E-R. I have also put the email down in the description for you. And for now, I'm going to ask that you please keep stories to a maximum of 2,000 words, and please keep them family-friendly. And maybe I will read your story or stories on some of my future episodes. As always, a big thank you goes out to my buddy Russ for helping me out with my intro music. Russ is the bassist and sometimes singer for local band Drive-By High Five. And hey kids, if you like the rock and roll music, they will be playing at the Reed Park Zoo's Summer Safari Night right here in Tucson. That will be Friday, August 8th at 6 p.m. And I believe that is one of the very last safari nights for this year at the Reed Park Zoo. So please go check it out, check them out, and show them some love. Also, as always, big thank you goes out to Ben over at Chasing the Whimsy. You can find the link to his podcast down in the description. Please go check that out, show him some love, and thank you again, Ben, for your continued support. For this, our 4th episode, I will be sharing the next 2 chapters from my stories about my father. That's right, 2 stories for the price of 1. And while I do have many more of these, please keep in mind that not all of my stories will be autobiographical in nature. In fact, I am thinking that for my very next episode, I might mix it up a little with one of my spooky stories. So, please stay tuned for that. All right, folks, enough babbling. Here we go with episode 4. Stand by.
Storytime with Mr. C. Storytime.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of Storytime with Mr. C. This is the next 2 chapters in my collection of stories I wrote about my father. This is Napping with the Fishes, followed closely by Late Night Cheerios, both from Father Allen. This is one of my earliest memories. From the time I was 2 years old up until I was 4, we lived in the Villa Venice apartments in Tucson. They still exist, but they are now the Villa Venice condominiums. I know we lived in one apartment for a while, and then we moved across the complex to a larger apartment at some point. The apartments were 2 levels, with the living room and kitchen on the ground floor and bedrooms on the second. I know this because I vaguely remember falling down the stairs at least once. I think there was a sliding glass door in the kitchen which led to a tiny little backyard. I have fractured memories of one of these backyards, and I swear there was a junkyard on the other side of its wall, complete with a junkyard dog. The northwest corner of the apartment complex butted up against the backside of the Midway Drive-In movie theater, which was located on Speedway Boulevard up until 1979. And because of the proximity, it was common for us to hang out at the apartment swimming pool while we enjoyed a movie on the Midway's single big screen. Residents of the apartment complex would even crawl over the fence that separated us from the drive-in and stretch the speakers from the back row as close to the fence as they could manage so that we could also have sound for our movies. It was pretty cool. It was also not at all unusual for us to use the swimming pool for swimming. On the day of this particular event, I was about 4 years old, and I was in the swimming pool with my sister. As we frolicked about in the water, our father lounged in one of the highly coveted fold-out lawn chairs, complete with leg rest. He was most likely enjoying a cocktail and definitely smoking a cigarette. I couldn't actually swim, so I was doing my favorite swimming-related thing, where I would just get into the pool, grab onto the edge, and I would allow my body to hang in the water, and then I'd scooch my way hand over hand around the whole perimeter of the pool. It wasn't long before my scooching endeavors started to bore me, so as I made it back around to the deep end for the third or fourth time, I decided it was time to try something exciting and new. I could let go of the edge of the pool for just a second, pause long enough to make it really exciting, and then I would just grab right back onto the edge. I don't know why this seemed like an entertaining idea at the time, but it did. And I think I may have successfully completed this daring maneuver at least once or twice, but as was often the case, I pushed my luck. As I once again let go of the edge, I slowly drifted away, just enough so that I could still barely brush my fingertips against the edge, but I couldn't get a hold of it. I swear it was like a scene out of some suspenseful movie. It might have even happened in slow motion. I started floundering around like a drowning child, I suppose. I don't remember the next part, but my sister says she thought I was playing. I was pretending to be a drowning child. So she pushed me back under the water, figuring that I would just shoot back up and laugh, and no such luck. I vaguely remember flapping around underwater, and then I remember being splayed out on the deck right next to the pool with my father hovering over me. He looked terrified. I remember his eyes, big, blue, and scared to death. He told me years later that when he had pulled me from the water, he was certain that my limp little body was dead. No breathing, no pulse, nothing. He had given me mouth to mouth, and he squeezed the water out of me. He did this until I coughed, spat out more water, and eventually fluttered back to life. I think he was scared because his little boy was in trouble, but I think he was terrified because Mom would have killed him if I had expired on his watch. I'm betting he might not have even told her anything about what had happened at all. I don't remember any fuss being made or any trips to the hospital or any visits from medical personnel. But the one thing I do remember the absolute most about that day, the thing I can still see in my head with perfect clarity. It was later in that same day, and I was still in my swimming trunks and my t-shirt, and I was meandering around outside of our apartment with my bare feet against the warm sidewalk as if nothing had ever happened. And clutched in my filthy little hands was a gift. For having escaped my watery grave, my father had presented me with a delicious Arby's roast beef sandwich. And all was well in my tiny little world. That was Napping with the Fishes. And now it is time for Late Night Cheerios. My mom was gone a lot of the time when I was a kid. Not because she wanted to be gone, but because she had to be. She had realized that my father's drinking habits were going to ruin us, and if we were going to survive, she had to make some money. She went through nursing school when I was very young, and after she completed her courses and received her certification, she proceeded to work her butt off. She was constantly at the hospital, whether she was working her regular shift or picking up a much-needed chunk of overtime to pay for whichever bills were delinquent that particular week. This left my father in charge of taking care of me and my sister, which meant that the two of us were basically all on our own. He would take advantage of any opportunity to go off and do God knows what at any time of day or night, leaving us to fend for ourselves. He would return home only after the bars and strip clubs had closed, reeking of alcohol and ranting about some bastard who had been looking at him. Sometimes his knuckles would be bloodied because the most recent bastard had looked at him the wrong way, or for too long. I remember waking up in the middle of the night on a regular basis, and I could hear him tearing around the house until he would pass out. I still dream about it sometimes. One summer evening when I was about 8 or 9, my best friend Dove and his little brother Ira had come over to spend the night. I was the one who would usually trek 2 houses over to sleep at their house, mainly to escape from the insanity of my own, but on this occasion they had demanded a change. So we dragged their sleeping bags over, along with an inappropriate number of toys, and transformed the living room into our fort. My father was off doing some unknown thing, and my mother was probably trying to sleep, and my sister had locked herself in her room in hopes of avoiding the overwhelming number of cooties that had swarmed into her home. Dove, Ira, and I behaved like only young boys can, goofing around like a bunch of idiots, eating way too much food, and watching television into the wee hours of the night. Sometime during those wee hours, I woke to find my father standing over me. "Wake up," he whispered. "It's time for breakfast." I sat up and rubbed my eyes as he roused my 2 friends out of their sleeping bags. He directed us to sit at the dining table as he excitedly headed for the kitchen, and the 3 of us shambled over, still lost in a sleepy haze. After a few moments of banging around in the kitchen, my father emerged with 3 massive Tupperware bowls, 3 tablespoons, a sugar bowl, a carton of milk, a bunch of bananas, and the family-sized box of Cheerios. He dumped everything on the table, and we watched with heavy-lidded eyes as, with all the dexterity of a drunken 2-fingered sloth wearing oven mitts, he constructed 3 of the heartiest bowls of breakfast cereal ever known to man. "Breakfast is the most important meal of the day," he whispered, as he littered the table with toasted oat bits and chunks of banana. A liberal dose of sugar and milk was added to each bowl, and with his creation complete, my father stepped back, thrust his hands into the air. "Eat up, boys!" he shouted, and then staggered towards the back of the house to collapse wherever his body took him. Dove and Ira looked at me, looked at the oversized Tupperware bowls that had been set before them, and slowly began to eat. I reluctantly grabbed hold of my tablespoon and started shoveling cereal into my mouth for fear that my father might wander back out and scold me for wasting food. We ate in silence, not looking up from our bowls, and only after we had finished every single bite did we crawl back into our sleeping bags. I rose early the next morning, climbed aboard my bicycle, and fled my house with the hopes that I might avoid any embarrassing conversation about my father's late-night shenanigans. I realized after a short while that I was not going to be able to hide forever, so I began pedaling home, certain that my soon-to-be ex-friends would be waiting with hateful stares and painful questions. As I approached the house, I could see Dove and Ira romping around in the carport, pelting each other with handfuls of gravel. I slowly rolled my bike to a stop at the edge of the yard as they turned in my direction. I almost bolted, but knowing that I would have to answer for my father's behavior eventually, I held my ground. "Hey, where'd you go?" Dove yelled. "We want to ask you something." Here it came. I hoped they would be merciful. The 2 boys approached me with determination in their steps, their soiled fists filled with the carport gravel that was surely meant for my punishment. And as they were almost upon me, I could see that their faces had twisted into smiles. "When can we spend the night again?" Dove asked, his voice pitched high with excitement. "Yeah," chirped Ira. "Your dad is cool." Who would have thought? Apparently, nocturnal cereal consumption was much more fun than I had ever realized. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this 4th episode of Storytime with Mr. C. That was Napping with the Fishes and Late Night Cheerios, both from Father Allen, my collection of stories about my father. For next week, as I mentioned, I am going to step away from Father Allen for just a bit, and I will be reading you one of my spooky stories. I don't feel that the story is super spooky or anything, but if you don't like zombies and bloody stuff, you might want to take a week off. And I will be back with more from Father Allen the following week. So, spooky stuff on Sunday, August 3rd, and back to Father Allen on Sunday, August 10th. So please come on back for all that good stuff. In the meantime, go check out Ben's podcast, Chasing the Whimsy. Thanks again for hanging out and listening to my stories. I hope you come on back for the next one. Until then, take care, be safe.